How's it going, guys? This is Professor Tatum. I want to recap on a few things here that some students maybe it seems maybe either didn't take the time to review the material I've already provided or are confused about it. So this is just an additional helpful video. Okay. Um, so I want to respond to an ID term as part of this lecture activity you'll be working on. I'm going to kind of walk you through step by step how if I were a student and I had to write an ID term based on what I know my expectations are as Professor Tatum, I would do. Okay. Let's take a look first. I want to remind everybody where you find anything related to the exam or content quiz. It's always going to be in the module labeled as content quiz or exam material. All right. Content quiz one and exam one in this case. So you have all this material here. You have this year, we'll talk you through basically the first part of the exam, which is also the same as what you'll see on the content quiz, which has your ID terms. Basically, a lot of what I'm going to show you here, I've already showed here, but it's very clear by the number of views on the video that not everybody is taking the time to watch that, unfortunately, even though it says to do that before proceeding. But you do, of course, have an overview here as well that talks you through some things for the exam. And then you also have this document here. I kind of talk you through these documents in this video about how to write these essays. You also have an example essay response where I've also included notes out on the margin for things saying, hey, look, this is exactly what I want to see. But what I want to pop up here now is our exam review, show you how I would be preparing for this exam, all right? And I give you these reviews well in advance so that you're not having to cram at the last minute, right? I want you to be able to be starting to work on these things ahead of time. Say, for example, we're taking notes on some of these ID terms to try to figure out how we can write them for our exam, right? Without having to do too much cramming at the last minute. So for the sake of an example, I'm going to use this term here, mercantilism. So I read all kinds of crazy responses and copy pasta about mercantilism. A lot of people, very strangely, seem to have a very similar response about it being something that was prevalent through the 16th to the 18th century, even though those dates were not specifically mentioned in class, and then tying it to modern capitalism and saying things about how it brought the English goods, even though we weren't talking about the English. I mean, we very generally, but we hadn't looked at English colonization by the time we were talking about mercantilism. Yet people had this very similar specific response, which is very strange. But anyway, I would copy the term over to a document here where I'm taking some notes. You go and bold it, you can label it however you want. And then remember, when we're writing ID terms, we need to be looking for two things. There's two parts to our response. We're looking for who or what is this thing and what happened with it. The other thing we're looking for is historical significance. Remember, it's always either the first of something or the last of something, led to something else, example of something else, or demonstrated something else. All right, this is it. This is exactly what we're looking for historical significance, nothing else. If you have anything else you want to say, it should go in this portion. This should be very straightforward. This was historically significant because it was the first, or because it was the last, or because it led to, because it was an example of, or because it demonstrated. Boom, get straight to the point there. If you want to tell me about the thing and what's happening with it, well, that fits in this first part. Okay. So let's take a look at the notes for mercantilism. Again, I believe I showed this in another video, maybe, but if not, we'll go ahead and see a way that we can navigate through to find our notes easier. And there's actually a much quicker way to do this and much more effective way to kind of organize all your notes. But that takes a lot of time to walk through. If anyone's interested, please talk to me about setting up office hours so I can help you organize your classwork so that we can set that up. But for now, let me show you another way that we could all be able to do this. And that's to go in here. If I had no idea which lecture the term mercantilism was in, I didn't know where to look in my notes. Ideally, you have notes you can pull up and Control F on. But if not, you can use these slideshows, okay? So I would pull up the very first slideshow. Control F, remember either hold down Control or Command if you're using Mac, and then press F for find. You get a search box, and then you type in the term you're looking for. Mercantile. Boom, it's telling me there's nothing with that term in this lecture, so I know it's not this lecture, okay? So then I go to the next lecture. All right, let it load again, Control F, mercantilism, nothing, okay? So then we look to the third lecture. Nope, not on this one, okay, so look to the next one. Boom, here it is, popping up. mercantilism. All right, so we can see this is the driving force of European rivalries. All right, we need to very clearly say what this is. If I ask you, for example, who is John Tatum? You're not going to say he's some guy who posts all kinds of stuff on Canvas. He sends us a lot of emails and he gets irritated when we don't read them. I've seen pictures of him and he has a beard. No, you're going to say John Tatum is a history professor at TAMU CC, right? Or he is my history professor. Then you might describe me by saying some of those things. I want us to do the same thing with these ID terms. Let's start by saying exactly what they are, then we can describe them, okay? And here it's very clearly telling us this is an economic theory, okay? So that's the first thing I should see. And we see that this economic theory is very clearly based on a limited amount of wealth and resources. And if you watch this video lecture, I very clearly broke down what that meant and provided some contemporary examples of how people act when we believe there's a limited amount of wealth or resources, all right? So that's one key point we definitely want to include for mercantilism. Let's go ahead and jot that down here in our notes. An economic theory based on limited wealth and resources. Okay, so I'm starting to get some good idea of what this generally is, what's happening with it. Let's keep seeing what else we can find. And again, if you have notes on this, you'll have a little more in depth than what you can find here on the slideshow. We got a lot here on the slideshow for this one. We see also here there's a goal of mercantilism to create a favorable balance of trade, meaning to sell more to other countries than you buy from them, export more than you import. Okay, there's a goal of creating a favorable balance of trade. All right, then there's the question down here. And again, if you're following along with the lecture and if you have notes, this is a lot easier to connect the dots, but I think we could do it even without that, just looking here. So how did European empires aim to acquire wealth and resources and create a favorable balance of trade? Well, if you were listening to the video lecture at all, you'd see that they did so by establishing colonies, all right? Very clearly showing us that mercantilism pretty directly led to colonization of the Americas, right? And from there, this whole lecture starts talking, and really the next couple lectures talk about how that led to various empires to come colonizing the Americas, which led to a big kind of contest for power or an imperial contest to colonize the Americas. How can we say this? We can jot some notes down here. See, this not showing us it's the first of anything, not seeing that it's the last of anything. We can see pretty clearly that this led to European nations colonizing in the Americas. All right, and I might add a little to that when we actually get to the response, but I'm going to go ahead and just leave this here for now. All right, so we have notes here for what we need. Again, if you're doing this with some of your terms ahead of time, if you're looking at the terms as you're reviewing your video lectures, you can be taking these kinds of notes here in addition to your regular lecture notes that might be helpful for an essay. And then you've got most of your work done ahead of time. And all you're doing is filling in the blanks, turning these into sentences. Or you can even practice writing some of these into sentences ahead of time and then just clean them up a little when you copy them over for your exam response, okay? Now, let's take a look back at the lecture activity. Anybody, by the way, who's following along up to this point, I'm going to go ahead and give you the answer to question one. Question one will be boiled egg. Boiled egg. All right, I'm eating one right now, drinking a cup of coffee as I make this video. So we'll go ahead and make that the answer to question one, boiled egg. Just write out the word boiled egg. Don't overcomplicate it. I'm just giving credit to those who are following along and making it clear to those who are not that you need to be following along with these kinds of videos. All right, so go ahead and put your answer in there for question one. Here, for these, we need to follow the instructions when we're looking at ID terms. It says copy and paste the text below in the response, then replace the bolded text in brackets with your own words. And I've provided example ID terms of this. I've talked through the example ID terms in the video. But what we can do here is copy, exactly like it said, and paste in the response. And this will create us a response where we're seeing two parts to our response. First telling us what it was, and then why it was historically significant. Just defining one of those things there. All right, so what do we know that it was? We can go ahead and copy and paste from here and turn these into sentences. We know that mercantilism was, I'm going to go ahead and make this say an economic theory based on a limited amount of wealth and resources, period. That's a solid sentence, okay? Go ahead and follow along. Do exactly what I'm doing here, guys. Make that your first sentence. And then we'll go ahead and copy and paste this over also from our notes. And we can just go ahead and add a few words here to make this a complete sentence. We can say something like the goal of mercantilism was, I'm going to go ahead and rephrase this a little bit, was to create a favorable balance of trade. Boom. That pretty clearly there in just 2 sentences, very straightforward, tells me who it is and what happens with it without getting lost in the 16th, 18th century and modern capitalism, whatever else, right? Historically significant because we have a very straightforward answer straight from the class sources. So we shouldn't have to Google this or look at the ChatGPT, right? Go ahead and copy paste that and edit as necessary because we'll say it led to European nations colonizing in the Americas. Boom. All right, so that's actually a pretty solid answer right there. I'm going to take it just a step further, just to show my professor I've really been paying attention. I've been watching the video lectures. I'm getting the main picture here. I'm seeing how this fits in the bigger picture of everything we're looking at. We can say that these nations coming and colonizing, this in turn led to the colonial competition, because that's what we talk about in a lot of these lectures, colonial competition between various European empires, such as Spain, France, and England. So if you guys want to include England, here's how you can do so, because that's the way they are covered here when we're talking about mercantilism, is they're coming in and competing with Spain, and then we see France doing the same. There are other countries as well, but if you're really paying attention to the video lectures, you're going to see that these are the three empires who we really kind of watch, colonize, and follow. All right, guys, hopefully this helps you see exactly, again, what I'm wanting to see for these ID terms. Copy, paste, fill in the blanks. Make sure you have both parts of your response here. Make sure that your significance portion has only something that's first of, last of, example of, led to, demonstrated. Use those words. If you cannot use those words, you need to think about it a little harder, but kind of really revisit your lecture slideshow. In a lot of cases, I will spell these words out for you, or I'll say them over and over in the video lecture. So be looking out for those things. When, if I'm telling you exactly what I'm looking for and you don't get anything quite like that, you're not going to get full credit. Sorry. But anyway, here's what I'm looking for here. Hopefully this helps you. Keep this around. This might be helpful for your exam. Keep up the good work, guys. Let me know if you got any questions.